From a logbook of Captain Nathaniel Mercer, April 14th, 1856. We turned the boat southward at 9:30, following what we believed to be the stern lamp of the Delta Queen, ahead by perhaps a quarter mile. The light held steady against the fog. Samuel called out twice by speaking trumpet, received no answer. At 10 minutes past the hour, the light went dark. When we rounded the bend at first light, there was no boat. There was no landing. There was nothing but empty water for 3 miles in either direction. Samuel will not say what he believes he saw. I have told the crew to keep silent. The Mississippi River in the spring of 1856 moved like something alive. A vast, slow muscle of brown water carrying timber and grain and cotton downstream toward New Orleans. At night, the river became something else. Pilots knew this. They learned to read the darkness, to feel the pull of current through the wheel, to trust the placement of lanterns on distant shores. But that April, along a stretch of water between Natchez and Vicksburg, several pilots began reporting lights that should not have been there. Lights that moved, lights that, when followed, led nowhere. The first reports were dismissed. The river played tricks. Every pilot knew this. Fog could bend lamplight. Exhaustion could conjure shapes. But when 3 separate steamboats, traveling weeks apart, reported nearly identical experiences along the same stretch of river, the dismissals became quieter. And when 2 of those pilots refused to work that route again, the silence that followed carried weight. The Mississippi River in 1856 was the nation's central artery. Everything moved along it: people, goods, news, fortunes. The river pilots who navigated its channels held knowledge that could not be written down, could not be fully taught. They learned the river by feel, by memory, by the accumulation of thousands of small observations. A good pilot knew where sandbars shifted with the season, where the current cut deep, where snags lurked beneath the surface. They knew the river in darkness and in fog, when the water and sky became a single gray void. The stretch between Natchez and Vicksburg was considered particularly demanding. The river bent and doubled back on itself. Islands appeared and disappeared with the floods. The western bank, low and marshy, offered few landmarks. Pilots relied on channel markers. Lanterns hung on poles driven into the mud at key points, maintained by locals who were paid by the steamboat companies. These lights marked safe passage. To miss them was to risk running aground, or worse, striking a submerged tree that could tear through a hull in seconds. Nathaniel Mercer had piloted the river for 11 years. His steamboat, the Meridian, ran a regular route carrying passengers and dry goods. He was known for caution, for keeping schedules, for maintaining detailed logs. His first mate, Samuel Howell, had worked beside him for 6 of those years. Both men were accustomed to night travel. Both understood the river's moods. In early April of 1856, the Meridian departed Natchez at dusk, bound for Vicksburg with a light load and good weather. The night was clear, unusual for that time of year. Mercer noted this in his log. They made good time to the first 20 miles, passing 2 southbound boats without incident. Around 9 o'clock, as they approached a section known locally as Baptiste Reach, a long, gradual bend with deep water and few hazards, Samuel spotted a light ahead. This was not unusual. Another boat traveling in the same direction would show a stern lamp. The light appeared steady, white, positioned at the correct height. Mercer adjusted his course to maintain distance. The Meridian was faster than most cargo boats. They would overtake the vessel ahead within the hour. But they did not overtake it. For 40 minutes, the light remained at the same distance. Mercer increased steam. The Meridian's paddle wheel churned harder, but the gap did not close. Samuel called out by speaking trumpet. A long brass horn used to hail other vessels, but received no response. This, too, was not unheard of. Some pilots did not answer hails at night, preferring to focus on navigation. What happened next was noted carefully in Mercer's log, in language that remained precise even as it described something he could not explain. The light moved, not forward or backward along the expected course of the channel, but laterally, sliding smoothly from the center of the river toward the western bank. It maintained its height above the water. It did not bob or sway as a lamp on a moving vessel would. It simply glided, steady and silent, until it hovered over the dark line of trees along the shore. Mercer slowed the meridian. He did not follow the light toward the bank. The water there was too shallow, too unpredictable. Instead, he maintained his position in the channel and watched. Samuel stood beside him in the pilot house, neither man speaking. The light held its position for perhaps 3 minutes. Then it began to move again, back toward the center of the river, crossing the meridian's bow at a distance Mercer estimated as 200 yards. It did not illuminate the water beneath it. It cast no reflection. Mercer noted this specifically. The light showed clear against the darkness, but threw no glow upon the water, nor did it light the air around it, as a proper lantern must. When it reached the eastern bank, it went dark, not gradually, as a lamp being shuttered or extinguished, but instantly, present one moment, absent the next. The meridian continued downriver. At dawn, Mercer noted their position carefully. They were 3 miles south of where the light had disappeared. There was no landing on the eastern bank at that location. No town, no woodyard, no homestead. Just low bluffs covered in oak and cottonwood, and below them, a narrow strip of muddy shore. Mercer wrote his report that morning, then locked it in his cabin. He told Samuel to say nothing to the passengers or crew. Samuel agreed, but his face had taken on a quality Mercer recognized. The tight, inward look of a man who had seen something that conflicted with his understanding of how things worked. They reached Vicksburg without further incident. 3 weeks later, the steamboat Caddo reported a similar experience. The Caddo's pilot was a man named James Ridley, older than Mercer, with nearly 20 years on the river. His account was recorded not in a ship's log, but in a letter to his brother in St. Louis, a letter that survived in a family collection and was later deposited in a historical archive. Ridley's letter is dated May 8, 1856. He describes a parting Natchez on the evening of May 6, bound upriver for Vicksburg. The night was overcast, visibility poor. Around 10 o'clock, while navigating Baptiste Reach, his junior pilot spotted what appeared to be a channel marker ahead, a steady light at the correct position for one of the maintained lanterns. But Ridley knew that stretch of river. There was no channel marker at that location. He reduced speed and observed the light carefully. It appeared normal in all respects, white, steady, positioned as a navigation lamp should be. Yet its location was wrong. The nearest marked light should have been a half-mile downriver. Ridley made a decision. He would not approach the light. Instead, he altered course slightly, giving it wide berth, and continued upriver using his knowledge of the channel. As the Caddo passed the light's position, maintaining a distance Ridley estimated as 400 feet, the light began to move. It paced them. For nearly 20 minutes, the light traveled parallel to the steamboat, maintaining exact distance, matching their speed. It stayed over the water, never wavering, never falling behind or pulling ahead. Ridley described it in his letter. It kept station with us as a ship in formation might do, though there was no ship, no sound of engine or wheel, nothing but that solitary lamp burning steady in the darkness. Then, without warning, the light accelerated, not gradually, but instantly, as though released from some constraint. It shot forward along the river, covering what Ridley estimated as a mile's distance in perhaps 10 seconds, then vanished. The Caddo continued upriver. Ridley did not enter the incident in his official log. In his letter he wrote, "I have told no one aboard, and I do not intend to. A pilot who reports such things will find himself without employment. But I confess to you, brother, that I do not know what I saw, and the not knowing troubles me more than the seeing." By late May, rumors had begun to circulate among the pilots who gathered at the Vicksburg landings. The Mississippi pilot community was small and tightly connected. Men who spent their lives on a river shared information constantly about water levels, about snags, about hazards and safe passages. Gossip traveled faster than steam. Someone had heard that Nathaniel Mercer had seen something strange in Baptiste Reach. Someone else knew that James Ridley had altered his usual route without explanation. A third pilot, a young man named William Duff, mentioned casually that he'd seen an unexplained light near the same location 2 weeks earlier, but had assumed it was a fishing boat. The conversations were cautious, indirect. No pilot wanted to be the first to make a definite claim, but a pattern was forming. On June 2nd, 1856, the steamboat Laurel Hill made the run from Natchez to Vicksburg with a pilot named Robert Mackey at the wheel. Mackey was considered one of the finest pilots on the river, precise, unflappable, trusted with the most valuable cargo and the most demanding schedules. His account survives because he gave testimony to a steamboat inspector 3 weeks after the incident, testimony that was recorded as part of an official inquiry into why Mackey had refused to pilot the night run through Baptiste Reach ever again. The Laurel Hill departed Natchez at dusk on a clear evening. Mackey noted excellent visibility, calm water, good steam pressure. Around 9:30, as they entered Baptiste Reach, the lookout called attention to a light ahead. 2 lights, actually, positioned as they should be for a steamboat running downriver toward them. This was routine. Boats passed each other constantly. Mackey maintained his course, expecting the approaching vessel to swing wide, as was customary. The lights continued straight toward them. At a quarter-mile distance, Mackey signaled with his own lights and whistle. 3 short blasts, a query. "What is your intention?" No response. At 1/8 of a mile, with collision imminent, Mackey made a hard turn to starboard, taking the Laurel Hill dangerously close to the western bank. The oncoming lights passed the port, close enough that every man on deck should have seen the approaching vessel clearly. But there was no vessel. The lights, 2 of them steady and white, positioned at the correct height for a steamboat's forward lamps, moved past the Laurel Hill with nothing beneath them. No hull, no superstructure, no paddle wheel, no smoke. The water where the lights passed showed no wake, no disturbance. Mackey stopped the engine. The Laurel Hill drifted in the channel, while the crew stood silent on deck. The lights continued upriver, maintaining their spacing, their height, their steady progress against the current. Mackey watched them through his glass. He could see them clearly, 2 distinct points of white light, moving as steamboat lamps should move, except there was no steamboat. After perhaps 5 minutes, the lights separated. One moved toward the eastern bank. One moved west. Both went dark simultaneously. Mackey restarted the engine and continued to Vicksburg. He made his report to the steamboat company the following morning and stated that he would no longer pilot night runs through that section of river. When pressed for explanation, he repeated his account exactly as it had occurred, without embellishment or speculation. The inspector who recorded his testimony noted at the bottom of the report, "Captain Mackey is known to me as a man of sound judgment and reliable character. I have no reason to doubt his account, though I confess I cannot explain it." The practical problem facing the steamboat companies was not whether the lights were real, but whether pilots would continue working the route. By mid-June, 3 experienced pilots had either refused night runs through Baptiste Reach or requested reassignment to other stretches of river. This was unusual enough to warrant attention from company management. A meeting was convened in Vicksburg on June 18, 1856, attended by pilots, company representatives, and 2 local authorities, a harbor master and a county sheriff. The meeting's minutes survive in fragmentary form, preserved in a company ledger. The discussion centered on practical explanations. Could the lights be marsh gas? Unlikely at that location, and marsh gas did not move in formation or maintain steady altitude. Could they be signal fires on the banks? No evidence of fire sites had been found, and the lights appeared over water, not land. Could they be the result of atmospheric conditions reflecting distant sources? This was considered the most plausible explanation, though no one could identify what sources might be reflected, or why the phenomenon occurred only in that specific location. One notation in the minutes is particularly striking. Captain Mercer stated that whatever the cause, the lights behaved with apparent intention, responding to the presence of vessels in a manner consistent with directed action rather than natural phenomenon. He was asked to clarify this statement, but declined to expand upon it. The meeting concluded with a decision to increase channel marker maintenance in Baptiste Reach and to recommend that pilots maintain extra vigilance in that area. No official explanation for the lights was adopted. No formal warning was issued, but the lights continued. In late June, a timber raft crew working their way downriver reported seeing a light that followed them for several hours through Baptiste Reach. The raft master, a man named Johann Kleist, described it in a statement given at Natchez. "It stayed behind us always, like a dog following at a distance. We could not outrun it, though we had good current. When we pulled ashore to make camp, the light remained in the river, holding position. It was still there when we started again at dawn, though it showed less bright in daylight. By noon it had faded entirely. A light visible in daylight suggested something other than a simple lamp, though Kleist's account was treated skeptically. Raft crews were considered less reliable than steamboat pilots. Rougher men, more likely to drink, less accustomed to precise observation. But a week later, 2 separate steamboats reported similar experiences on the same night. The Natchez Belle and the Chickasaw, traveling several hours apart, both logged sightings of multiple lights moving in patterns that suggested coordination. The Natchez Belle's log describes 3 lights in triangular formation, maintaining fixed relationships while traveling upstream against strong current. The Chickasaw's log notes lights appearing and disappearing in sequence, as though signaling, though no pattern could be discerned. By early July, Baptiste Reach had acquired a reputation. Some pilots avoided it when possible, choosing longer routes or timing their runs to pass through in daylight. Others, particularly younger men, claimed the reports were exaggerated, the result of fatigue, poor visibility, or the natural tendency of rivermen to embellish stories. But the embellished stories would have grown more dramatic over time, more detailed, more spectacular. These accounts did the opposite. They remained spare, factual, repetitive, different witnesses using similar language to describe similar experiences. The consistency was more unsettling than variation would have been. On the night of July 19, 1856, the steamboat Avalon entered Baptiste Reach at approximately 10 o'clock. The pilot was a man named Henry Cutler, and his account represents the most detailed description of the phenomenon that survives. Cutler's testimony was given not to company officials, but to a physician in Vicksburg, Dr. Samuel Morton, who had developed an interest in the reports and was attempting to collect first-hand accounts. Morton's notes, preserved in his personal papers, provide unusual detail. The Avalon was running with passengers, 43 by manifest count, and a full cargo. Visibility was moderate, with scattered clouds and a half moon. Cutler noted conditions as favorable for night navigation. At 10:15, the lookout reported a light ahead, positioned as a channel marker would be. Cutler knew immediately that something was wrong. The light was in motion, drifting slowly from north to south across the river. He reduced speed and observed. The light moved with the current, but not quite at current speed. It lagged slightly, as though caught in an eddy, though there was no eddy at that location. After several minutes, the light stopped its lateral movement and held position in mid-channel. Cutler intended to pass it at a safe distance. But as the Avalon drew closer, additional lights appeared, not gradually, but suddenly, as though they had been there all along and only now became visible. Cutler counted 5 lights, arranged in no particular pattern, all at approximately the same height above water, all burning with the same steady white glow. The Avalon's passengers had come on deck to observe. Cutler heard their voices, curious at first, then uncertain. Someone asked if it was another boat. Someone else suggested it might be fishermen. The lights began to move, not in formation, but independently, each following its own path. One moved upstream, directly against the current. 2 moved toward the western bank. One rose higher, climbing until it was level with the Avalon's pilot house, 30 feet above the water, then descended again. Cutler stopped the engine. The Avalon drifted in the channel, while the lights continued their movements. They showed no apparent awareness of the steamboat's presence. They simply moved, purposeful but incomprehensible, like elements of a pattern too complex to recognize. One light approached to within 50 feet of the Avalon's bow. At that distance, Cutler could see it clearly. It was not a lamp. It produced light, but there was no flame, no wick, no glass chimney. The light simply existed, a sphere of white luminescence perhaps 2 feet in diameter, hanging in the air above the water. He could see through it, not completely but partially, as though it possessed substance without quite being solid. Through the light, he could make out the dark line of the far bank, dim but visible. The light held position for approximately 1 minute, then rose vertically and moved away, accelerating to a speed Cutler described as faster than any steamboat could achieve. The remaining lights gradually faded, not going dark suddenly, but dimming over the course of several minutes until they were gone. The Avalon restarted its engine and continued to Vicksburg. Cutler gave his account to Dr. Morton 2 days later. Morton noted that Cutler appeared sober, articulate, and visibly distressed by his inability to explain what he had witnessed. Several passengers from the Avalon later corroborated the essential facts of the sighting, though their descriptions varied in detail. The incident that brought the phenomenon to its closest approach occurred on the night of August 3rd, 1856. The steamboat River Sphinx was making a mail run from Natchez to Vicksburg, a priority route that could not be delayed or rescheduled. The pilot was Thomas Brennan, working with a crew of 8 and carrying 14 passengers. They entered Baptiste Reach at 11:20 p.m. under a cloudless sky with excellent visibility. Brennan's written account was composed 4 days after the event, at the request of the postmaster in Vicksburg, because the mail had arrived 14 hours late, a serious delay requiring explanation. The account is precise in the way of a man attempting to describe something that resisted description. At 11:35, the lookout reported lights ahead, a large number of them, scattered across the width of the river. Brennan's initial count was at least 20, perhaps more. The lights were not moving. They hung above the water in a loose cluster, some higher than others, all burning steady. The River Sphinx slowed but continued forward. There was no other route. The river at that point was perhaps a quarter-mile wide, bordered by marshland. To stop and wait was possible, but the mail schedule did not permit significant delay. Brennan intended to navigate through the lights at reduced speed. As the River Sphinx entered the cluster, the lights began to respond. They moved aside, not quickly, but deliberately, creating a path through the formation wide enough for the steamboat to pass. The movement was so clearly coordinated, so obviously purposeful, that every man on deck recognized as intentional. Brennan described the passage through the lights. We proceeded at quarter speed through a corridor of luminescence. The lights held position on either side, close enough that they illuminated our deck but cast no shadows. Passengers stood silent. Several crew members asked permission to go below. I denied this request, as I required all hands on deck. The passage took approximately 10 minutes. Halfway through, one of the lights descended and approached the pilot house. It came to within 15 feet of where Brennan stood at the wheel. He could see it clearly through the pilot house windows, a sphere of cold white light, unmarked, uniform, silent. It held position there, neither advancing nor retreating, moving slightly to maintain its relationship to the boat as the River Sphinx continued forward. Brennan noted, I could not escape the impression that the light was observing us, though it possessed no features by which observation could occur. The impression was powerful nevertheless. After perhaps 2 minutes, the light withdrew, rising and moving away to rejoin the others. When the River Sphinx emerged from the cluster of lights and continued downriver, the lights remained behind. Brennan looked back and saw them still hanging above the water, motionless now, their glow reflecting faintly on the surface. By the time the River Sphinx reached the southern end of Baptiste Reach, the lights were no longer visible. The incident shook Brennan badly enough that he submitted his resignation from the postal route 3 days later. In his final report, he wrote, "I have worked this river for 16 years and have seen all manner of natural phenomena. What occurred on the night of August 3rd was not natural. I cannot say what it was, but I am certain of what it was not. It was not atmospheric reflection, not marsh gas, not the effect of fatigue or poor visibility. The lights acted with purpose. They responded to our presence. They moved aside to let us pass. I cannot continue to work a route where such things occur." The postmaster forwarded Brennan's report to the Regional Postal Authority with a note stating that Brennan was a man of excellent reputation and long service, not given to fancy or exaggeration. No official response was issued, but quietly, the Postal Service began routing mail through alternate channels, avoiding night runs through Baptiste Reach whenever possible. By late August of 1856, Baptiste Reach had effectively been abandoned for night navigation. Pilots who were required to transit that section did so only in daylight, and even then with evident reluctance. The steamboat companies did not issue formal warnings. To do so would require acknowledging something they could not explain. Instead, schedules were quietly adjusted. Routes were modified. Justifications were found. The phenomenon continued sporadically through September and into October. A packet boat reported lights on September 14th. A timber crew saw them on September 28th. Each sighting was similar to previous accounts. Lights above the water, moving with apparent purpose, showing no physical source. Then, in early November, the sightings stopped. The last documented report came from a southbound cargo boat on November 8th, 1856. The pilot noted a single light visible for approximately 30 minutes before fading from view. After that date, no further accounts appear in surviving records. By the following spring, when river traffic resumed its normal patterns after winter low water, pilots began cautiously working Baptiste Reach at night again. Some reported unease, a sense of being watched, but no lights were seen. The phenomenon, whatever it had been, appeared to be over. The historical record becomes fragmentary after this point. Nathaniel Mercer continued piloting until 1859, when he transferred to a Lake Michigan route. His later logs make no reference to the events of 1856. James Ridley worked the Mississippi until 1861, when the outbreak of war disrupted river traffic. He enlisted in a Missouri regiment and was killed at Shiloh in April 1862. Robert Mackey never returned to night piloting. He took a position as a harbor master in Memphis and remained there until his death in 1873. Thomas Brennan left the river entirely. He moved to St. Louis and worked as a warehouse manager. In a letter written in 1870, discovered among his correspondence, he mentioned the events of 1856 once. "I have told the story only to my family, and they do not know what to make of it. Neither do I. I have spent 14 years attempting to find a rational explanation and have failed. I am no longer certain that a rational explanation exists." Dr. Samuel Morton, the Vicksburg physician who collected accounts from several pilots, compiled his notes into a manuscript titled Unexplained Luminous Phenomena Observed on the Mississippi River, 1856. The manuscript was never published. It survives in the collections of a historical society in Jackson, Mississippi, cataloged among Morton's papers. Morton's conclusion, written in 1858, reads, "I have interviewed 12 witnesses, all of whom I judge to be credible. Their accounts show remarkable consistency despite being given independently. I can find no natural explanation that adequately addresses all aspects of the phenomenon. The lights were not celestial, not terrestrial, not the product of combustion or reflection. They move with purpose. They responded to the presence of observers. They violated no physical laws that I am aware of, yet they behaved in ways that no known physical process can explain. I am forced to conclude that the phenomenon, whatever its nature, remains beyond our current understanding." The steamboat companies kept no official records of the incidents. Company ledgers from 1856 show routing changes and schedule modifications, but offer no explanations. One notation in the account of the Vicksburg Natchez Packet Company, dated October 1856, reads simply, Baptiste reached night service, suspended pending assessment of navigation conditions. No assessment report has been found. Local newspapers made only passing reference to the events. The Natchez Courier ran a brief article in September 1856 headlined, River Pilots Report Unusual Lights, which summarized the situation in neutral language and offered no conclusions. The Vicksburg Evening Post published nothing about the phenomenon at all. The silence is more telling than the reports. In an era when newspapers eagerly publish sensational stories, the near absence of coverage suggests an active decision to avoid the subject. Steamboat traffic was vital to regional commerce. Anything that might discourage travelers or suggest the river was unsafe would have economic consequences. Better to say nothing. Baptiste Reach today is unrecognizable from its 1856 configuration. The river has shifted course. The banks have changed. The landmarks that pilots use for navigation have vanished, replaced by modern channel markers, buoys, and electronic guidance systems. The Mississippi River Commission has straightened and controlled the channel. What was once a difficult stretch of river is now routine. The entry ends there mid-thought, as though Mercer could not find the words to continue. Or perhaps he decided some things were better left on you, but the records remain. Logbooks, letters, testimony, scattered across archives and historical collections. Men who had nothing to gain and much to lose describing something they could not explain. Their accounts show no signs of collusion, no evidence of shared delusion. They simply saw what they saw and recorded it as accurately as they could. What were the lights? The explanations offered at the time, atmospheric reflection, marsh gas, optical illusions, fail when examined against the details. Atmospheric phenomena do not move purposefully, do not respond to the presence of observers, do not create formations and maintain them across time. Marsh gas does not hang 30 feet above water in stable spheres. Optical illusions do not affect multiple witnesses simultaneously over a period of months. The modern explanations fare no better. Ball lightning has been proposed, but ball lightning is transient, lasting seconds, not minutes or hours. It does not move in coordinated patterns. It does not appear repeatedly in the same location over an extended period. Some researchers have suggested that the phenomenon might have been related to geological factors, perhaps piezoelectric effects from stressed rock formations beneath the river, producing luminescence through mechanisms not yet fully understood. But Baptiste Reach shows no unusual geological features. The bedrock is typical for that region, and no other location on the Mississippi has produced similar reports. The phenomenon remains unexplained. What troubles the careful reader of these accounts is not the strangeness of what was seen, but the purposefulness of how it behaved. The lights move aside to let the river sphinx pass. That single detail resists every natural explanation. Random phenomena do not create corridors. They do not respond to the presence of a steamboat by opening a path. They do not hold position while a vessel moves through their formation, then close again afterward. The implication is uncomfortable. If the lights acted with purpose, something directed them. But what? And why? And where did it go when the sightings stopped in November 1856? The men who saw the lights were clear about one thing. They felt observed. Thomas Brennan described the impression of being watched. Henry Cutler noted the sense that the lights possessed awareness. These were not imaginative men. They were practical professionals accustomed to distinguishing between perception and misperception. They believed something was present in Baptiste Reach during those months. Something that used light to manifest. Something that maintained station, that followed, that observed. Something that, for reasons unknown, allowed itself to be seen. The disappearance of the phenomenon is as mysterious as its appearance. It did not fade gradually. It did not diminish in frequency. It simply stopped completely and finally in early November 1856. Was it finished with whatever purpose had brought it there? Did it move elsewhere, to some location where no one recorded its presence? Did it return to whatever place such things come from when they are done manifesting in this one? The pilots who witnessed the lights could not answer these questions. Neither can we. The difference is that they did not need to answer them. They simply needed to avoid Baptiste Reach at night and continue their work. But the questions remain. And on certain nights, when fog lies heavy on the river and visibility drops to nothing, pilots navigating the Mississippi between Natchez and Vicksburg still feel particular unease passing to the stretch of water that was once called Baptiste Reach. They cannot say exactly why. The channel is well marked now. The navigation is routine. There is no logical reason for concern, but the unease persists. Perhaps it is only the weight of old stories, the accumulated residue of accounts passed down through generations of rivermen. Perhaps it is nothing more than the natural discomfort of navigating water in darkness, the ancient human wariness of places we cannot fully see. Or perhaps, on some level too deep for conscious recognition, they sense something that was never truly gone, something that only learned to hide its lights. From an undated journal entry found among the papers of Nathaniel Mercer, written sometime after 1860, I have been asked many times what I believe the lights were. I have no answer that satisfies. I can only say that the river, which I thought I knew completely, revealed itself to contain depths I had never suspected. Not depths of water, but depths of mystery. I spent 11 years learning every bend and bar and snag. I thought I had mastered the river, but there are things that move along it that cannot be mastered, cannot be understood, cannot be explained. They exist. They are real. And they do not require our understanding to be present. I think of this sometimes, late at night, and I am grateful I no longer work those waters. The Mississippi is a great river, but it is not only a river, it is also a border. And sometimes the things that live on the other side cross over, for a time, for reasons of their own, written